There's no more Texas and Oklahoma, but 4 additions out west and so many teams that have a shot to win the Big 12 in 2024.
This is the 2024 Locked On College Football Season Preview, only on the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Welcome to the 2024 Locked On College Football Season Preview, Big 12 edition. I'm Drake Toll of Locked On Big 12, and we'll hear from several of our local experts throughout the conference. Before we discuss how many teams make the playoffs and who could surprise, we have to hear from the true contenders of the Big 12 Conference, joined by Derek Johnson of Locked On Jayhawks, Cody Stovall of Locked On Oklahoma State, Chris Level of Locked On Texas Tech. We are missing JT Wistersill of Locked On Utes tonight. He already thinks that the Utah Utes have the conference locked up, so he decided to not show up this evening. I'll represent the team that believes it's going to go undefeated this year. Derek, though, with Kansas, Cody with Oklahoma State, Chris with Texas Tech. Tonight, we talk about the champions of the conference, and Cody, we start with you. A lot of return production for Oklahoma State. They bring Ollie Gordon, who might be the best player in the conference, one of the Heisman contenders, preseason Heisman contenders. What does Oklahoma State bring to the table that makes them conference champions after falling a game short last season?
Well, other than the 21 returning starters and 91% of the roster, I think it's going to be the senior leadership. We have 36 seniors and we have 16 redshirt juniors. That seniority is going to allow so much continuity on the O-line and D-line that communication is going to allow players to just fly instead of talk like last year.
Derek, for you, the Kansas Jayhawks, there are a lot of people in the national media who believe that Lance Leipold's team is not the Kansas of old, and that should be the case. However, if you ask guys like Brett Ciencia of Pick Six Previews, he has Kansas at 8 in the Big 12. Still a bad taste in the mouth of a program that's been lackluster the last 15 years up until the Leipold era. What's different about this Kansas?
Well, first of all, over 30 seniors as well in the program for Lawrence. And I think one of the things that's going under the radar this year, as far as their championship contending ability, is the schedule. I mean, last year, Kansas finished 8th in the Big 12 technically, but they played 6 of the top 7 in the conference. Like West Virginia, for instance, finished ahead of Kansas in the standings. They only played 1 of the top 6. So it's incongruent schedules. But guess what this year? They only play 3 of the top 9 in the preseason poll.
Chris, for you with Texas Tech, same thing. Brett Ciencia, Heisman voter at Pick Six Previews, has the Red Raiders at 10th in the conference. They were in my conference championship game preseason last year and didn't meet that expectation, a very high expectation that many had set for them. What went wrong last year that will change this season to make Tech a contender?
It's funny, Drake, because I think the Kansas, Oklahoma State, Texas Tech all in a way kind of have the same question, and it really comes down to the signal caller. You know, I mean, Derek's probably trying to, can Jalen Daniels stay healthy? I think how far can Alan Bowman take Oklahoma State? We saw him take him to the title game, but can they get further? Is there a ceiling there? No, Alan Well, great player. Here in Lubbock, it's can you keep a quarterback healthy? If you do, and you can, I think you'll really like the results. But Baron Morton shut down in spring practice and had to mend that shoulder. It's supposedly 100% now. If he stays healthy and is available for 12 or 13 games, I think that people will really like the results. But it hadn't been that way in a decade, and that includes Pat Mahomes.
We know that Kansas State, Utah will also be contenders at the top. People have talked about Iowa State, return production of West Virginia. Those schools are going to give you a whole lot, too. We'll get to them over the course of the show today. Utah bringing Cam Rising and Brent Keithy back to Kansas State, bringing Avery Johnson in. And maybe as I point to those two teams, talk about the head coach, guys who have solidified themselves. Chris Kleiman now over the course of the last 5 seasons in Manhattan, and Kyle Whittingham over the course of the last 2 decades in Salt Lake City. Crazy Uncle Kyle says stuff, though. He's always got hot takes, and this guy has come out in the last couple of weeks and said that we're going to move to 2 super conferences with the SEC. We're weeks away from the college football season. This guy's focused on how they're going to break away from the NCAA and create their own college football playoff. He has taken maybe the spot of our friend Mike Gundy as the one dude who can make headlines with the power of his words. Cody, it's hot takes time. What is your Oklahoma State hot take going into 2024?
That Oklahoma State will not only end up in Arlington in the Big 12 title game, but we will, in fact, end up in the CFP, which should kind of revolutionize where we are in the recruiting landscape.
Cody, right here, front row. Your quarterback is Alan Bowman. So how does the statement you just made, alongside the statement that I just made, how do those two things merge here?
Well, ironically enough, Alan Bowman did have to get significantly better within the pocket, right? His biggest issue last season was he would bail 17 yards backwards and throw it into the stands. He will forever own the OSU record for most passing yards in the second row of the student section. But this year,
Hey, there were pretty ladies all over there. The co-eds were
right.
out.
This year, I think he's afforded himself a lot of opportunity to stay within the pocket. Now, part of that is because we have 172 starts returning on our offensive line. But even outside of that, right, he doesn't have a propensity as of yet to bail in the pocket. Of course, we won't know until the lights come on and we're playing up other opponents. But as it sits right now, he's not crawdaddying himself back 17 yards anymore, and he's staying within the pocket to orchestrate the offense. And that's all we really need him to do. We don't need a game changer. We need a game manager. Let's just call it.
I'm just glad he's not rotating with two other guys to start the season, because that's some headway there. Same with Ollie Gordon. At least we know who the starting running back and starting quarterback there are in Stillwater, which is a big step forward from last year.
I love this idea that Alan Bowman in like year 8 or whatever he's on at this point is going to be like different now. It's like, well,
Guys,
this is the year.
Alan Bowman is almost a man. He's almost 40. All right.
Had a coaching career at Michigan, is off his parents' insurance, has a mortgage, wife, and kids, and he's starting at quarterback for Oklahoma State. We talked. That's the hot take for OSU is that they win the conference, the real OSU, by the way. Chris Level of Texas Tech, what is your Red Raiders hot take for 2024?
Oh, man. Well, I didn't know you were going to pin me down on Texas Tech, but I mean, one hot take
I literally just did it for Cody. I did not see that it's about to go.
I don't think that because Utah and Kansas State are the two favorites. I don't think either one of them wins the league, okay? I also think that here would be a hot take for the league. I think you get two teams in the CFP. Yeah, I said it. And I think it'll be difficult, but I think that's what happens. As far as Texas Tech goes, I think Taj Brooks won't lead the Big 12 in rushing. He didn't do it last year. He was close. They're trying to get him the record here, but I think you'll be a lot more balanced, and it'll be remind everybody more of a Mike Leach and Cliff Kingsbury. Throw it a lot more than run it this year. It may not necessarily be a hot take, but that's what's coming.
Yeah, Taj Brooks to Ollie Gordon to R.J. Harvey to C.J. Donaldson to Jaheim White to Giddens to you just name a plethora of great running backs. Devin Neal, great running backs and quarterbacks in the Big 12 this season. Derek, your hot take for Kansas this year?
Well, I'm glad you brought up Taj Brooks, and I'm really glad that Chris is part of this one because Drake, maybe you can explain this to me. I think Taj Brooks is an outstanding running back. Why is Taj Brooks getting on all these all-conference teams over Devin Neal? Because if you look at the total rushing yards, that's the one thing going to Taj Brooks. You have a couple hundred extra rushing yards. Look at the yards per carry. Devin Neal, 1 full yard better. Look at the yards per catch, over 6 yards per catch better. Look at the yards per play from scrimmage, almost 2 yards better from scrimmage. Who has more touchdowns? Devin Neal by 7. Devin Neal was being penalized because the team averaged 11 less plays per game than Texas Tech, and because of the fact that they are a very balanced offense. They throw it to a bunch of other players. They have a good backup running back to give the ball to. So here's my hot take working off of that. I think with Jeff Grimes in tow, who you're very familiar with, I think he will pound the rock with Devin Neal. I think Devin Neal is going to finish top 10 in the Heisman voting this year, which doesn't sound, I guess, that extreme. If we want to go further, hot take, I'll say he gets invited to New York. But KU has never had a running back, and they've had like good running backs for all the faults as a program. They've had Gil Sayers, they've had John Reagans, they've had guys who've come through the program who have never gotten a top 10 Heisman finish. They've had 3 top 10 Heisman finishers all time. All of them are quarterbacks, all of them a long time ago. So I'll say that he finishes top 10, and if we want to get exciting with it, we'll say he gets an invite to New York.
I will not allow the name of Taj Brooks to be besmirched on these airwaves. I just can't do it. No, all kidding aside, it's fascinating to me that this league has totally flipped. You're going to have, I don't know, 6 to 7, maybe even 8 of the top 20 running backs in the country in this league. We used to focus solely on quarterback and wideout. This is a running back heavy league. It's ground and pound. And I think that the style of football has changed. I mean, Corey Kiner at Cincinnati was a 1,000-yard rusher last year. I mean, there are just so many top running backs, but it's the schemes that have changed and have dictated it because of the way that these teams are defended. And I think that it's cyclical, but it'll be fun to see who ends up on the postseason All Big 12 team. But my man Taj, He's on the preseason All Big 12, and I think rightfully so. But I like your man Devin Neal too, Derek. I will admit it.
A lot of great.
For me, the Devin Neal thing is can he stay healthy? Sorry, just like Jalen Daniels, right? Jalen Daniels might be the best. I think he is the best quarterback in the Big 12, but can he stay healthy? Same with Devin Neal. He very well probably should be right there, but it's another question of can he stay healthy? I think that would be the only reason I might put Taj Brooks above a Devin Neal.
Yeah, I mean, there are guys who are injury prone, and I think that question applies for everybody, though. Utah, especially if they're number one in the conference. They're returning their starting 22 from 2022. They just didn't have a football team last season. They were all hurt. So everybody's back for Utah. That was there 2 seasons ago when they won the Pac-12, and that's why a lot of people believe that they deserve the hype they get. And for Kansas State, with Avery Johnson coming back, what I still need to see is Avery Johnson start more than 4 games. I still need to see Avery Johnson come out and captain a football program for the entirety of the season. We saw him rush for 4 touchdowns in the game. We saw that his young leadership was there. Can he keep it throughout the season? That's still my big question mark before I buy in on Kansas State being in Arlington. I don't have them in Arlington. Let's talk schedule. Cody, how do we avoid losing at Tulsa this year? The little South Alabama thing you guys did last year, not letting you forget that one quite yet. You've got South Dakota State, Arkansas, Tulsa very early, and then that Utah game is a big one. As you look down the schedule for Oklahoma State, how does this play out?
Well, it's very fair to throw some South Alabama shade. All right, I will gladly accept that. We deserve that. But what I will say, other than Ollie Gordon potentially being injured for game 1, outside of that, I do think that we're going to be able to lean on the run game. And every time teams decide that they're going to load the box to stop the run, the fact that we do have multiple 800-yard receivers returning should work to our benefit this season.
For Kansas,
from a scheduling perspective, Murderer's Row is really at the beginning, right? Yeah. Because after that, you take on Utah, and then you have a big matchup with Kansas State, and then you have another matchup with West Virginia. I think if Oklahoma State starts the season, right, 7-0, 6-1-ish, I think it's going to carry over for the remainder of the year and keep us at like a 1-loss ball club.
Yeah, I would argue, Derek, that you're in a similar situation with those last 4 games post-bye being at home against Iowa State. Tough opponent, but a home game, quasi like Arrowhead, wherever Kansas is going to play. Then BYU on the road, very winnable. Colorado at home, at Baylor. Great chance you go 4-0 in that last stretch. How do you conquer that West Virginia even then, there doesn't seem to be that part of the schedule where Kansas really just faces, 3 straight weeks in the gauntlet. Does this feel like the best place that Lance Leipold team could be schedule-wise?
Yeah, for sure. No, like I brought up earlier, they played 6 of the top 7 last year, and a couple of those, like you look at the Texas Tech game, you look at the K-State game, it was with a 3rd-string quarterback who was a true freshman walk-on when fall camp started. So you look at this year, like, yes, they have just historically not been able to beat Baylor, and the Iowa State game being at Arrowhead, probably not great because Iowa State will travel super well. We've seen how they travel for Kansas City for the Big 12 tournament. I mean, they probably have more fans there than even the KU fans. So those will be interesting. But yeah, it really is that early stretch. I mean, I look at the at West Virginia game 2 years ago, they won at West Virginia in overtime. And that helped get them bowl eligible. Jalen Daniels, there's a bunch of videos that locally they show a lot of him yelling into the camera, new era, that was the start of the new era. And I think it's kind of fitting that that's your first Big 12 game. It's your first Big 12 road game to kind of come full circle here and try to do that again and springboard it into a strong season. And then the at Kansas State one is kind of the elephant in the room because you lost 15 straight to them.
Yeah, Chris, before we talk about the schedule for Texas Tech, I think Utah got it more favorable than anybody else, avoiding a lot of major games. That Oklahoma State is going to be the rubber meets the road. Past that, I think they're in a spot until they go on the road at UCF to be okay because they don't lose. They don't lose at home in Rice-Eccles Stadium. They've only done it a couple of times in the last 5 seasons. Then for Kansas State, and as we'll get into the West Virginias and TCUs, there are a lot more toss-up games than a Utah might face. Chris, for you, I want to put words in your mouth. Those first few get Abilene Christian, Washington State, North Texas, Arizona State, Cincinnati, Texas Tech's 5-0. That's a 5-0 stretch right there. How do you finish the season strong under Joey McGuire?
Yeah, you had mentioned earlier, Drake, that you had Texas Tech in the title game last year, fell short. It lost 6 games last year. 5 of those 6 losses against teams that had won 9 or more games. Yeah. This year, your first 8 of 10 opponents didn't even go to a bowl game last year. And I think your first 5 of 7 are at home. So you want to start talking about favorable, not easy, but favorable schedules. Joey McGuire and Texas Tech certainly have that. The first key is at Arizona. and Noah Fafita and T-Mac and just seeing if you can, win that one. Because if you can win that one and manage your situation up to that, I mean, you're probably going to be ranked. You're probably going to be making some noise at potentially 6-0. And then you've got some more home games after that. But, tricky trips to Fort Worth, Ames, Iowa, Stillwater. My daughter goes to Oklahoma State too, so I can always still do the guns up. She calls it a pistol. I call it a gun. So that one will be tricky the week before Thanksgiving. But no easy road trips per se, but boy, do they have a good chance to get off to a hot start with so many, opponents that aren't picked to do very well and so many of these games at home.
Those are our Locked On Big 12 Conference contenders. Thank each of you guys for joining the show. Be sure to subscribe to Locked On Jayhawks, Locked On OK State, and Locked On Texas Tech on YouTube or wherever you get your podcasts. There are a few teams that have a shot to make a run from the back row. Does Baylor, 3-9 Baylor, have something in the West Virginia? Deion Sanders. That's all coming up next on the 2024 Locked On College Football Season Preview, Big 12 edition. Today's show is brought to you by FanDuel. Look, the best part about FanDuel is you can go right now and wager on MLB programs that are all in the Big 12, from the Arizona Diamondbacks out to the Tampa Bay Rays. Those states both encompass our conference. And I love sports. I love them so much. But right now it feels like everything's kind of, we've winded down. College football is coming up, but it's not here quite yet. And the MLB still is. And this summer, FanDuel is hooking up all customers with a boost or a bonus daily. That's right. There's something for everyone every day, all summer long. Head to FanDuel.com and start making the most of your summer. You could probably put money on the Texas Rangers. You're likely going to lose at my Texas Rangers, or the Houston Astros. You're hot. Who's going to win the AL West? All of that is on FanDuel. FanDuel.com. It's FanDuel, official sports betting partner of Major League Baseball. Today's show is also brought to you by Game Time. Game Time has a feature called Game Time Picks that makes getting tickets for your favorite live events even easier. It filters out the fluff to show you only incredible deals and great seats. Get 50% off. This is a Labor Day offer for Diamondbacks Dodgers. They have curated deals that make it easy to find the best prices on great seats, including super deals, seat views before you buy, lowest prices guaranteed as well. This Dodgers Diamondbacks Labor Day offer, 50% off tickets exclusively on Game Time for the Dodgers at Diamondbacks. Limited availability and supply, so get your tickets while they last for their Labor Day special. Take the guesswork out of buying concert tickets or MLB tickets or comedy tickets with Game Time. Download the Game Time app. Create an account. Use code LOCKEDONCollege for $20 off your first purchase. Terms apply. Again, create an account. Redeem code LOCKEDONCollege for $20 off. Download Game Time today. Last-minute tickets. Lowest prices guaranteed. We now welcome in our Dark Horse Big 12 contenders in the 2024 Locked On College Football Season Preview Big 12 edition. Cameron Stewart of Locked On Baylor, Paul Rockel of West Virginia, Kevin Borba of Buff, Stephen Simcox of Horned Frogs, and all of you guys have one thing in common. You're not picked to win the Big 12 or really that close to it, but you can prove why your team is going to change that narrative here. Mountaineer Paul, we will start with you because West Virginia seems to be the best of this group as far as the preseason comes to terms. Why should West Virginia be in the conversation for one of the top 2, 3, 5 teams in the Big 12?
Well, earlier on the show, I heard guys talking about seniors and senior leadership, and West Virginia definitely has that going on. The best offensive line in the conference, several people ranked them that. A left tackle that's most definitely going to be picked in the first round, and several others along that offensive line they're very respectable. A lot of talent returning on the offensive line. A front seven that returns. The back end, obviously the big question mark for this team, but Garrett Green, Jaheim White, CJ Donaldson are a really scary tandem. And they led the Power Four in rushing last year. I think that's a huge thing. They return all that production. The top 4 wide receivers from last year all return. 93% of the offensive production is back for this team. There's really only 1 or 2 questions that we have. Probably the most excited we've been in 15 plus years for a team in Morgantown, saying a lot with our history, although we haven't quite been up to snuff in the Big 12, admittedly. So the back end is really our biggest question mark. We think we've got it fixed. We really do. We brought in 6 high-quality guys. So if that's the question, look out.
I probably should go to Simcox next with Locked On Horned Frogs because they are picked preseason higher than Colorado, but they lost them last year. Kevin Borba, you got engaged this last weekend. You have a ring, something that Deion Sanders won't win in Boulder. Why? Ooh, sorry.
Wow.
Why Will Colorado contend to the Big 12 this season?
Yeah, I think Colorado's the biggest boom or bust team, maybe in college football. They were an enigma last year, and they brought in around 45 new players this year from the transfer portal. But I think it comes down to a couple of guys. They have the best quarterback in the Big 12 in Shedeur Sanders, and they have arguably one of the best players in college football in Travis Hunter. So they added a lot more talent around them, and they addressed their offensive line issues, which I think the five of us probably could have formed a better offensive line than the group they had last year. And they added a lot more depth in the trenches on the defensive line. So they have more weapons, they have better trench play, and then you also have two of the best players in college football. And I think that makes a huge difference in a Big 12 conference where there's a lot of games that are coin flip games where it's 50% of the games are decided by one score. So Colorado just needs to be on the right side of a few of those. And next thing you know, you're contending in October and November.
Steven Simcox, TCU goes to the national championship, beats Michigan in the college football playoff, follows it up with 5-7 in Fort Worth last year. But Brett Ciencia at Pick Six Previews has the Frogs at number 6 in the Big 12, number 29 in the country. He likes the boys in purple. Why is Sonny Dykes' team going to surprise people this year?
Well, a bigger sense of urgency this year. I think they felt like college football was canceled after beating Michigan in that playoff game, and I sort of agreed with them. And unfortunately,
is that why what happened that next game is what happened? They just kind of canceled the rest of the season?
Yeah, I don't know. I think I blacked out. But I know that, yes, last year they were 5-7. I'd like to apologize to everyone for the whole Colorado thing. We're the reason why they were a story for an entire month. My apologies. But this season, Sonny Dykes has admittedly said, hey, we're more focused this year. We've spent more time like doing conditioning and off-season work, which is a cool thing. I think that's a big positive. Returning quarterback in Josh Hoover, a revamped offensive line, a defensive coordinator in Andy Avalos that is more aggressive. Their former defensive coordinator is now a high school coach. That's not a joke. That's just a factual statement. Andy Avalos is going to bring more blitzes and pressure the quarterback and disguise coverages, mix up his front. So all those things I think will be positive. And this is a coaching staff, even though last year was a debacle, that has a proven concept of winning. Like Sonny Dykes has won at all of his different stops, with the exception of Cal. But he's done a good job everywhere he's been. I think he understands how to win, what it takes to be good in this league. And they've got good skill players, a QB that's returning some production, and I feel like they're going to be a force this year.
Cameron Stewart of Locked On Baylor. Looking at my sheet here, you know the bottom dwellers of the conference are the third segment. I don't know why. After 3-9,
I was a little overzealous. Yeah,
3-9 last year. Why are you here? Why are you in the sneaky contenders portion of our show? What's going on with that, big guy?
Look. That is a great question. That is a great question. But I know that if Simcox is here, then I need to be here too. But why are they going to be sneaky, Drake? On the positive side, Dave Aranda's the defensive coordinator because we know he's much better at that than he's been a head coach.
And Gary Patterson's the head coach. Right?
Little Gary Patterson spice in there, little Gary Patterson influence in there. And so it's Dave Aranda on the defensive side. It's Jake Spavital on the offensive side. I was one of the first on the Spavital train. I am still on that train. It's not going to be fixed overnight, but I love the offense that he's bringing to the table. I mean, who would have thunk it? A spread offense in college football. This thing might catch on. Spread with a lot of air raid in there. Looks a lot like the Bryles offense that led Baylor to great success 10 years ago. So I love bringing that back, and I like having Dave Aranda back in his bag coaching the defense. Other than that, the roster is a huge question mark, but I think there is a lot of potential from a good young secondary last year and a good young running back in Dawson Pendergrass last year, ready to hopefully take the next step. So I do see some positives here for this Baylor team.
Baylor is 5th in return production defensively in the nation coming into 2024. That is a defense that was 116th overall. So,
baby, bring it back.
You got to run it back. All of us, we're doing it all over again.
They got a good defensive coach at Midway High in Waco, as Simcox referenced. Right. So who knows if it goes wrong? There you go.
Fingers crossed for those guys that you put together. All the same guys that were okay last season. We'll go back to you, Mountaineer Paul. If there's one big hot take that you've got for 2024 for your squad, what is it?
I think West Virginia beats Penn State in week 1. I really do.
We can all get behind that, and we can all get behind it.
Yeah.
For the betterment of the conference as well, like you guys are just pointing to. But I think West Virginia beats Penn State in week 1, which is going to be the litmus test that tells us all we need to know about West Virginia. If they do that, everything's on the table. I think they will beat Penn State in week 1. I do believe that. and then the conference is up for grabs. I really think they've got a great shot at that and possibly a CFP bid. Every player on the roster in every press conference this year, the words Big 12 championship have come out of their mouth. Neil Brown's got this thing turned around in year 5.
Far cry from last season when at Big 12 Media Days, Neil Brown said, "Look me in the eyes. I promise we won't finish last." And they didn't. He was right. He nailed it. And
You're still riding that.
College football playoff contender Andy Staples has some random formula he used with On 3 that had UCF and West Virginia in the playoff this season. So I guess thanks, Andy Staples from On 3. We'll see. Simcox, for you, what's the big hot take for TCU?
Savion Williams. He's going to be a first-round draft pick next year, Drake Toll. I think he's set up to be really good. He really clicked with Josh Hoover at the end of the season, had a huge game against Texas. Big physical wide receiver, can go up and get 50-50 balls. There's going to be a vertical passing game this season because there has to be. So they're going to give him opportunities to make plays down the field. I like what this offense is bringing to the table. They've brought in some, guys like Dana Holgerson to help them out, which is kind of intriguing as well. So I think they're going to be better on that side of the ball this year, more efficient. And as bad as the defense was last season, Sonny Dykes is an offensive coach. Kendall Browse needs to do a much better job, or this team's not going to have a lot of success.
Kevin Borba, you've got 2 Heisman Trophy contenders at 3 positions on Colorado. What's your big hot take for 2024?
Yeah, I think that could be one of them, that they send 2 guys to New York. And I think another one is that they start off 5-0. I think Colorado probably has one of the tougher opening slates in all college football. They go on the road 3 out of the first 5 games, and they get to play an FCS power in North Dakota State who could really embarrass them on national television on a Thursday night. And so I think they have a chance to make a statement. While a lot of people view it as a chance to be embarrassed, Colorado has a chance to make a huge statement and kind of show, hey, we've learned from our mistakes last year, and we're going to not fizzle out after an electric 3-0 start, which was a fun month of September.
Cam, it does feel like Baylor has some momentum, recruiting trail, especially the We Pay Players shirts. What's the big take out of Waco?
The hot take is that they're the best Big 12 team in Texas this year, which I know is not scorching, but it would be quite a success. I'm sure you had Tech in the first segment, and I bet you got our friend Parker and UH in the final one, and then we've got Steven here. So some question marks around this conference, obviously the middle class of this conference, and a lot of that is in the state of Texas. We saw Tech kind of fail to meet expectations last year. I had them as a dark horse to win the conference, and they didn't get really near that. And I think there's enough question marks here in the other teams in the Big 12 that if Baylor's got a good enough quarterback situation, which they haven't had the last couple of years, then I think they could be the best of those 4 teams.
Mountaineer Paul, let's talk schedule now before we wrap this thing up. Everybody lock in, dial in for a second. Think about these teams: Penn State, Kansas, Oklahoma State, Iowa State, Kansas State, Arizona, and you still got UCF and Texas Tech on. That's 8 teams that are going to be really good this season. West Virginia gets all 8 of them. How do you get through it?
It's going to be tough for sure. Luckily, we have a ton of depth this year, more depth than we've ever had. We're at least 2 deep in every position, and that's every position. That's going to help a lot. Don't forget about Albany, who was the FCS final last year. I think we said that on the show the other day, but it's, the one positive I can look to in that murderer's row of a schedule, the backyard brawl will not be a walk in the park. It never is in that rivalry. Home and away. If you look at how these are all broken up, West Virginia, when starting in Big 12 play, has Kansas at home, on the road, Oklahoma State. Then they come back home to Iowa State, home again, Kansas State. So you're getting the best teams at home outside of Oklahoma State and Arizona. Those are the 2 toss-up games. If my prediction is correct and they can beat a Penn State in week 1, those 2 road games could be the losses against Oklahoma State and Arizona. You're still looking at a 10-2 West Virginia, pushing for that title and a playoff berth.
Steven Simcox for TCU, that game at Stanford, Long Island. UCF, SMU on the road against Kansas. That SMU game also on the, quote, road. I think it'd be more TCU fans there probably no matter what. How do you get through a first 5 that offers some early tests, and then the back end of the schedule, it has Oklahoma State, Texas Tech, Arizona? What's the best case scenario with a schedule like this?
Yeah, I think getting off to a good start's a huge key. That's a great take by me. And also nice. Just those teams early in the schedule will tell a lot about this TCU team. You get UCF with KJ Jefferson and an offense that's very explosive, a Stanford team that's not predicted to be great, but it's returning a lot of players, and then an SMU team 4:00 in the afternoon on the CW. Get your popcorn, watch a rerun of Vampire Diaries, then watch the Iron Skillet, baby. That's a big ball game. SMU, they demand to be taken seriously. They paid themselves into a power conference, much like Lori Loughlin did with her kids, getting them into USC. They're trying to get this done. So this is a big deal for them. This is the biggest game on their schedule. They always circle it. It's a huge thing. Tens of people will be there in Dallas to watch it. Hostile environment. So Frogs need to get a statement victory there. And, yeah, the back half of the schedule is tough. On the road against Utah, that'll be a big-time game, right? Utah fans have already kind of penciled themselves in as winning the conference, so that's kind of rich. And then Oklahoma State, Arizona down the stretch as well. You got to win some of those swing games and upset people if you're going to be a factor in the race and have a chance, at least at the end of the season, to make it to Arlington.
At 3 o'clock on the CW, SMU, TCU. 6 o'clock, Superman and Lois. So if you stick around a little bit, you get a good reruns. They're on.
Lead an audience, baby. Lead an audience into Smallville.
For you, Kevin Borba, we've already mentioned North Dakota State, Nebraska on the road, Colorado State on the road. Those aren't easy. Back half of the schedule with games against Texas Tech, Utah, Kansas, and Oklahoma State all in a row. How do you do it?
I think, honestly, one, Colorado needs to come into this season with a mindset of whatever happens to us isn't the end-all be-all. If we start 5-0, we're not national champions. If we lose 3 games in a row, we could still savage this season. I think Colorado had no in between last year, so when they started 3-0, they fell on their face, and then when they started losing, they just kept rolling and rolling. And so I think when you get to that stretch, you got to take it week by week, right? And if you split those games and you go 2-2, I think that's a success. And if you happen to go 3-1, also a success there. You just have to be cognizant that every game has to sort of be taken an approach of we got to focus on this team. We can't look ahead. We have to focus on the task at hand. Otherwise, you're going to be embarrassed again, right? Unfortunately, we will not be on the CW in front of Superman and whatever the Lois. But Lois. Apologies. But we will have chances in primetime games to make an opportunity or make a name for themselves, right? So use those chances and make a statement in the positive way. Otherwise, you'll be a meme.
Cameron Stewart, good news. Baylor is recruiting really, really well right now. Bad news, they're all 17 years old. This schedule has Tarleton State, and then after that, pretty much every week is a gauntlet. How do the Bears get through it? What's the best case?
Well, best case, I've got them as a best case 7, maybe 8 win team. And that is on the very high end, right? And I look specifically, Drake, at foliage season, beginning of October, through to
most of us call it fall, but yes, thank you.
Yes, through to well, in Texas we don't really have that. So fall, I guess, to Thanksgiving at Iowa State, Butt Bowl in Lubbock, hosting Oklahoma State on homecoming for some reason, hosting TCU. That's usually a protest game. They don't like winning those. And then at West Virginia, they really don't like winning those because they've never done it. That is an absolute gauntlet when you're looking at a team that's coming off of 3-9 last year. So how do they do it, Drake? It starts with running the football. I know that's so simple, but this was the worst offensive line in the conference last year. Thank you for coming in, Colorado. Appreciate that. But they couldn't run the ball whatsoever last year, even though that's what they were supposed to do. And they're really supposed to do it in this Spavital offense. But if they can't, they become too one-dimensional and therefore I don't think good enough. But I
Baylor
believe
was 116 in overall defense in the country, 101st in overall offense in the country, so they fired the offensive coordinator. That wraps up our contenders from the back half segment. Next, we go to the teams that are going to need a little bit of help. Thank you guys for being here. Make sure to subscribe to Locked On Baylor, Locked On West Virginia, Locked On Buffs, Locked On Horned Frogs, wherever you get your podcasts. And which other teams maybe could possibly please do something in 2024. We will tell you who wins the conference as well on the 2024 Locked On College Football Season Preview, Big 12 edition. Today's show is brought to you by Ibotta. Sandals, sunscreen, snacks for the kids. What do these have in common? You're probably buying them a ton again this summer, but don't stress about the cost. Use Ibotta and get cash back on all of your purchases. It's a free app. That is right, free. That lets you earn cash back every time you shop. Earn on hundreds of items from groceries to beauty supplies, even toys. The average Ibotta user earns $256 per year. That could cover the cost of an entire shopping trip, that flight you've been eyeing, or the fancy dinner that you've been craving. You can save on over 2,400 brands and shop at over 1,000 retailers, including your favorite grocery stores, Lowe's, Macy's, Sephora, Best Buy, more. It's time you joined over 50 million users who use Ibotta. Right now, Ibotta is offering listeners $5. That's right, $5 just for trying Ibotta by using code LOCKEDONCollege when you register. Go to the App Store, Google Play Store, Download the free Ibotta app to start earning cash back and use code LOCKEDONCollege. That's IBOTTA in the Google Play or App Store and use code LOCKEDONCollege. Back on the 2024 Locked On College Football Season Preview Big 12 edition, we're joined by Richie Bradshaw of Locked On Sun Devils, Jake Hatch of Locked On Cougars, Parker Ainsworth of Locked On Cougs, talking Arizona State, BYU, and Houston. This part of the show is brought to you by Puke. Throw up. Just absolute vomit everywhere. These teams are what we're calling nicely the dark horse candidates. Pretty much everyone in the country is voting these schools at the bottom of the Big 12 this season. I, as someone who loves all of the Big 12, hope each of you win and go to the college football playoff. However, the problem is that's not going to happen. Richie Bradshaw, we will start with you and Arizona State. You guys could have fun this season, doing the football stuff a little bit out there, right?
Yeah, it's a brutal schedule. You are facing arguably the top 5 best teams in the Big 12, all of whom are ranked, but it's second year of Kenny Dillingham. This is a very motivated team. It's that do your 111th, next man up mentality. They're adding talent through the transfer portal. There's young guys here. They're definitely hoping that they can build upon a 3-win season last year that could have been more if they learn how to finish games this year.
Yeah, Jake Hatch of Locked On Cougars with BYU. I mean, there's a team that last year, sitting midway through the year, was like, hey, great, we're going to a bowl game. We got 5 wins. We've locked it in. And then the skid down the stretch was demoralizing. How do you pick it up going into this next football season?
Well, quite frankly, they've addressed it head on. The 5-7 mark has been thrown in these players' faces all off season long. The strength staff, the coaches, they've all said, hey, you guys want to do that again? You want to be on a 5-game losing streak to end another season? Do what you're doing right now. So it's been a whole idea of heightening what BYU did last year to get themselves to that 5-2 record, as you mentioned, Drake, but they want to go past that. They want to win 6, 7, 8 games, but they are understanding there's a lot of work to be done with BYU.
Parker Ainsworth, basketball season's coming up there, big guy. That's going to be a lot of fun. Here you guys are going to have a hell of a starting 5 this season.
Yeah, are we talking football? I thought this was a basketball. No,
I do. Before you jump in, though, Willie Fritz, love him. Guy's been to a couple national championships at the FCS level, won the Cotton Bowl at Tulane. This is a great pickup. Problem is, it's year number 1, and that takes a whole lot of it. Chris Pesman's got like the 8. A couple of you guys don't have ADs. Or new ADs at the very least. That's a lot that Houston's facing.
Yeah, I think everyone feels great about the Willie Fritz hire, like you alluded to. He's been successful at every level of college football. It is year 1. There was an exodus of players in the transfer portal as we got into the coaching change. And we play 4 of the ranked Big 12 opponents. Oh, and then our non-conference includes a trip to Norman. Like, it's going to be a rough year from a scheduling perspective, but I don't think there's like people hanging their head down, like worried about the future of Houston football. Is just the immediate future is going to be, we're going to call it qualitative victories.
For you, Richie, going back to Arizona State, I mean, this is a program along with Arizona that it feels like a lot of people, at least in the last 2 decades, have overlooked. There has not been consistent hype for the program. And then when you hire that big name head coach, it all completely goes down the drain in Tom Herman. This year under Dillingham, I mean, what's the hot take? What's the, hey, if we do this, there's a way to make a wave in college football?
The thing that they need to learn to do is finish games. Last year, they went 3-9. They were in 4 other games. They very easily could have been a 6-win team. They were right there with Washington, who went to the national championship game. They very, very easily could have pulled off that upset. This year, they need to learn how to finish those games. They need to learn how to win football games that are tight. These one-possession games, these 10-point losses, you need to turn those into wins. And again, this is a very challenging schedule for the Sun Devils, but you can also look at it in a positive way and go, you know what? There's a lot of statement games here. There's a lot of opportunities for us to win these games and go, holy cow, what's going on in Tempe, Arizona? Kenny Dillingham's got these guys coached up right now.
Jake Hatch for BYU. Look, I go back to what Arizona was in the Pac-12 last year. I go back to TCU going to the national championship after a debacle under Gary Patterson going into Sonny Dykes. And then Baylor in 2021 coming off 2-7, winning the Sugar Bowl. Last season, West Virginia picked 1-11 by yours truly, goes to a bowl game, gets 9 wins. How does BYU become that team, that shocking team in the Big 12?
Get steady quarterback play. Obviously, there's a battle right now between Jake Retzloff and Gary Bohannon. You referenced the 2021 Baylor team. He's the only quarterback in this league right now who has a Big 12 title on his resume, and he happens to be quarterbacking BYU now. So whoever wins that job, they've got to provide steady quarterback play. If they can get the ball into BYU's playmakers' hands at wide receiver, at tight end, and also in the run with the running backs, that could go a long way to helping BYU out. I'm expecting a better defense for the Cougars in the second year with Jay Hill as their defensive coordinator, but it really comes down to, can they get the quarterback play that will elevate this program and get them to that 6 or 7 win mark?
Parker, last season, Houston did beat West Virginia and Baylor. So you got a couple of Big 12 wins, teams that have been there for a decade plus under your belt. And now coming up, UTSA is a good program as well that Houston knocked off. Now a new head coach, though. Is this a complete rebuild, or are there still pieces there to be competitive?
Definitely pieces there, including a returning starting quarterback, which is always nice to have, a couple of talented wideouts and things like that. I think the truth is there are going to be games where Houston is more competitive than people realize because of who Willie Fritz is. And there are a couple of other programs that, frankly, could drop those kind of games. They don't realize going to the third quarter that Houston is bringing what they're bringing. And I think Houston can upset a couple of people like that. I'm not predicting college football playoff national championship in year one, although I'm going to convince myself every week we're going to win that Saturday. But I do think that they're going to win more games than people are alluding to. This team is not as talented as they were a couple years back when they got to the American Athletic Conference Championship game and, you know, pushed Cincinnati for the round for the first half. That was Cincinnati team that went to the college football playoff then, right? But this is a team that has a very clear culture and identity under Fritz. I think it's going to carry him a long way.
Well, guys, we have 10 more minutes to fill. So everybody have anything good happen in the week for you guys? Or I guess let's make it an entertaining 10 minutes. Richie, what's your biggest hot take in the Big 12 outside of Arizona State?
Outside of Arizona State, biggest hot take. If Jalen Daniels stays healthy at Kansas, they are the biggest threat to Utah to win the Big 12. It hinges on his health.
Devin Neal, running back as well. Kansas has a great shot on Lance Leipold. Jeff Grimes comes in. A couple of us. Hey, Jake. No, Jeff Grimes.
Yes, we do.
That's going to be a Kansas team that's dangerous. Leipold he's instilled his culture there. I have them in Arlington in my book as well, Richie. Good, Richie. Hot start. Jake Hatch, your hot Big 12 take this season.
All right, here's the thing. The arch rival for BYU, Utah, is the hot team, obviously. There's a lot of talk about them nationally. Keep an eye on Kansas State. There is something there's something going on in Manhattan to me. I know that Richie said he thinks Kansas can make a run at. I think with what Kansas State has got going right now, keep an eye on them. I know they were picked second in the league, but I just keep looking at that team and wondering, okay, what are they missing? They're not missing much. So Avery Johnson and company, keep an eye on the Cats, because I really do think that they are kind of being overlooked in all this talk about the Big 12 title race.
Parker, as you scan the conference, what stands out to you as the hot take in 2024?
I'm also sticking to the Sunflower State. I think there's a lot of talk about Utah as the headliner in this conference. And I got to be honest, I think Kansas State is the team to beat. I know that Utah did very well in the Pac-12 the last handful of years. This is a whole different kind of travel schedule than they are used to. Kansas State also has a handful of, not just because there are a few of the teams on the screen right now, a handful of games at the end of the season they can kind of get right and get healthy as other schools are kind of falling down the charts. I think Kansas State's going to be really good this year.
Before we go into, I'm cruel, I know, going to make you all pick your Big 12 champion and give me who's going to Arlington at the end of the year. I go back to Corey Kiner at Cincinnati. His team wasn't very good last year. However, most people knew the name Corey Kiner. He stood out in the conference. Who's the one guy, Richie, for Arizona State that even if the Sun Devils aren't great, this is the name that everyone's going to know?
Oh, man. There's a lot of sleepers on this team. The first name that comes to mind is going to be nickel corner Cole Martin, former four-star kid out of Arizona. So local kid, plays at Oregon last year, standout on an Oregon defense, transfers to Arizona State. He will be taking over Jordan Clark's role as the nickel, potentially someone who flexes around the safety and all over the place for this defense, but a very high-level player and somebody that I anticipate is going to not only make a big impact for this team, but if you want another bold take, I think by the end of the year, you're going to be talking about him as a potential all-conference player.
Jake, you might have an All-American in Ben Bywater in your back pocket. Is that the guy that everybody's going to know?
Well, I hate to break it to you. Ben Bywater is officially medically retired.
Well, there you go. All right. Well, okay, Parker Ainsworth, Locked On Cougs.
I've got one for you, though. Keep an eye on his replacement. Yale Acera is the name to know. He's a 6'3", 250-pound linebacker who's from Pinview High School in Utah. He's going to come in and fill that spot for Ben Bywater. And if he can stay healthy this year, he's a redshirt freshman, but he has got all of the skill, all of the size to be an impact player as BYU's middle linebacker this season.
Gosh. All right, Parker, who is still alive on the Houston Cougars and playing football that could possibly make headlines?
I mean, it would have been really funny if you'd gone with any of the number of guys that transferred out in the coaching change. That would have been pretty good. No, I will say I'm torn between a rising sophomore running back named Parker Jenkins, not just because his first name is also Parker, but because he's a very talented running back. Looks like he's going to get a lot more carries this year. The Kevin Barbe offense coming from Mississippi State, Appalachian State before that. A lot more ground and pound out of Houston. Defensively, I love a kid named AJ Halls, who's a big-time safety, really, really loves contact, and you got to love that out of safety. Was a big-time player at New Mexico State, in New Mexico a couple years ago, New Mexico a couple years ago, looking to have a bigger role in the defense this year, and I think he'll have some, again, highlight kind of hits throughout the season. It's not the Tank Dells and stuff like that, the sexy positions we're used to necessarily, but ground and pound running back can be a lot of fun.
Richie, your two teams in Arlington, and who wins the conference?
I think right now I would go Utah and probably Kansas. I think Oklahoma State has a chance to make a run if they can find offense that's not Ollie Gordon, which it's a very good team. They've got the Presley kid. I can't remember his name at receiver, but Kansas versus Utah. I'm going to take Utah. If Utah has a healthy Cam Rising, that team is going to go all the way to the playoff, and they're going to be a really, really tough team this year, especially defensively.
Yep, salt in the wound for Jake Hatch. Jake, Arlington this year, do you also have Utah there?
I do have the Utes making it. Obviously, they are just a very talented team, as Richie talked about. Cam Rising, he's the ultimate gamer. I can say that just having watched him as long as I have from afar. I have the Utes. I have the Kansas State Wildcats, the top two teams in the preseason poll. I do see them being there in Arlington, but I will say this. I think Kansas State wins it. I think K-State will be the Big 12 champions this year. I just, like I said earlier, there is something about K-State that just they continue to kind of be slept on. I know they're in the Little Apple, as they like to call it out there in Manhattan, Kansas, but keep an eye on them. I think they're really, really good.
Parker, who plays at AT&T Stadium?
I got Kansas State and Oklahoma State. I think a lot of people are high on Utah for a lot, like I said earlier, a lot of great reasons, great time in the Pac-12. I think that the weirdness of this conference, a lot of teams that look a lot alike or a lot of teams that feel a lot alike from a national perspective is going to kind of yield some weird results as well. I'm going Kansas State and Oklahoma State in the game itself, and then Kansas State with the win. I think you could see both of them representing in a 12-team playoff, depending on how the rest of the country goes. Because there's going to be moments, I think, where Kansas State's going to be like, how good is this team throughout the season? I'm just really impressed by the roster they got put together up there.
Very much on board with Utah being in Arlington. I also have Kansas there alongside. I think Lance Leipold has established in Lawrence something different. That win against Oklahoma last year was a very good piece of that. And if the defense comes together, they're going to be dangerous. I'm right there with you, Richie. I got Kansas beating Utah at Arlington. Thank you, gentlemen, for joining us tonight. And to all the hosts that joined us, that does it for the 2024 Locked On College Football Season Preview. Big 12 edition, specifically to you guys, Richie Bradshaw of Locked On Sun Devils. Subscribe there. Subscribe to Locked On Cougars. Subscribe to Locked On Cougs, wherever you get your podcasts, and on YouTube. Follow and subscribe to your favorite Locked On Big 12 family of schools podcast. We'll be covering your favorite team every day throughout the season. And don't forget, I'll have you covered of the entire conference on Locked On Big 12, part of the Locked On Podcast Network. It is your team every day.